Welcome folks to the second screencast regarding anatomical movement. You're going to need to review this screencast very carefully over and over again and make good notes and bring it to lesson. We are not going to be going through this stuff in lesson, so make sure that you go over this at least twice, if not more, because there will be questions on this in your initial exams, so be very careful with this. Okay. As a basic overview, your body can move in several different ways, and there are key terms that you need to understand, and these key terms are as follows: flexion and extension, abduction and adduction, circumduction and rotation, pronation and supination, and finally plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. The key thing to remember with any of these anatomical movements or the way your body moves is that your starting position is the one that's seen on the screen. That is where you must start. So forget anything else. That's where you start. Any movement that differs from that picture in front of you there is what you need to explain. So if your arm moves upwards, you start in the position shown on the picture and then move it upwards. That is the movement being performed, okay, and that's what you'll need to explain in your exam and your initial exam. So we'll start with the basic ones, which are flexion and extension. Flexion is where we shorten a joint. Basically, we move two bones closer together, and this can only occur in the following areas. So your knee, your hip, your wrist, your elbow, and your spine. A good example of this is in your knee. So if we were lying face down and we moved our heel towards our bum, sort of like a quad stretch, you are flexing your knee. Okay, you're making that angle shorter between the joint. You can also do this with your elbow if you do a bicep curl and you bring your hand towards your shoulder. So you flex your biceps. Extension is just the exact opposite, so you're making something longer, and this can only occur in the same joints or the same areas of the body, so knee, hip, wrist, elbow and spine. And again, a good example of that is the knee. So if we were sitting down and bending our knee to start with, and we then stretch our leg out, you are extending your knee. Okay. Abduction, adduction, slightly more tricky. Abduction is where we take a body part away from the middle line of the body. The best way to remember this is if you, without being crude, but if someone gets abducted, they are taken away. Okay, so taken away from the center of the body. This can only happen in the shoulder and the hip. And a good example of this is with your arms. So if you see, to start with, if you put a centre line through the middle of that picture, from the middle of that person's eyes right down their chest and right to the torso, and if you see, if you move your arms outwards, you're moving your arms away from the middle of the body. That's called abduction. The opposite is called adduction, and that is basically moving your parts of the body towards the centre line of your body. So again, this can only occur in the shoulder and the hip, and it's the exact opposite of abduction. So for example, if we had our shoulders out to start with, or arms out, and we move them back towards the centre of the body as shown in the picture, you are adducting. And the best way to remember that is that you are adding to the body. So if you cross your arms, fold your arms, or if you cross your legs, you are adding to the middle of the body, so that is adduction. Circumduction and rotation are often confused, so be careful with this one. Circumduction is, again, the best way to remember this is to make a circle motion around a joint. And this only occurs in the shoulder. So a good example of this is if you put your arm out straight and then make a windmill type motion or a small circle motion as shown in the picture, that is circumduction. You are rotating your arm around your shoulder joint. So swimmers, for example, doing backstroke, or that sort of windmill arm motion, that is circumduction. Rotation is what we call a twisting motion, and the best way to remember this is if you had a pen in your hand, pretend it's a screwdriver and twist the pen around its axis. And again, this only occurs in the shoulder, alongside the hip as well. You can actually rotate your legs through your hip. So a best example here is if you put your elbow on a desk, maybe the one in front of you, if you do exactly what's on the picture, and if you move your hand slightly, twist it towards 90 degrees as if you're doing like an arm wrestling competition, you are actually rotating your shoulder. So as you do that, just look at your shoulder. It's making a twisting motion rather than the big circle motion that we did in circumduction. Again, the best way to remember that is using a screwdriver. That's a twisting motion. Pronation and supination, these only happen in your radio-ulnar joint, which is on your forearm just before your wrist. And you have two areas here. One's called supination. And if you look at the picture, supination just means palms up. So if you twist your arm, make the palms go up, that is supination. What I like to call a soup bowl. So if you scrunch your hands up, you could put water theoretically into your palm. That's a soup bowl motion. Supination, soup bowl. Pronation is the opposite. It's where you go palms down. So on the other side of the picture. And the best way to remember that is to pat something. Pat it down. Patting a basketball. Pronation, pat. Plantar and dorsiflexion only occur in your ankle joint. This picture speaks volumes. Plantar flexion, again, if you look at the bottom side of the picture, you are pointing your toes. Point for plantar. Plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion is just the opposite, so you're raising your toes towards your shin. Okay, so dorsi up, P for plant, plantar flexion. As an overview, and this is probably the most important two slides of this discussion, here are all of the movements possible at each of the different joints. You will definitely need to get this down somewhere. Really useful material. So I've made it quite easy into a chart. You can go back and forwards on this slide and pause it as you see necessary, and you can see all of the different joints and all of the movements available. You will notice in the shoulder there it says horizontal flexion and extension. I will cover that in one of the lessons as we discuss this before your initial assessment. So the last slide here is just the other types of movement possible, and again spine, that's a specialist one. Lateral flexion, again I will cover that before you do your initial assessment. Like I say, go over this screencast as many times as possible, get as much information down as you can for your notes, because we will not be going over this in class. I will be testing you on this before you come into your next session. Thanks a lot, folks.